No, it's all good, Paul. And if I disappear for a moment, just know it's probably because I'm grabbing Phoebe. She's about 15 feet from me, but if you all bear with me, I think we'll be okay.
You are entitled
Um,
to paternal leave.
yeah, that's it. I appreciate everybody's patience with that and value the forum. Um, Yeah, the concept and the approach that I have is may not be everybody's approach. And the reason why John Sorensen's name probably does come up and why I probably tend to lean that way and kind of create a background of criteria for Book of Mormon geography in this method is because my degree is an anthropology degree. And so I tend to, adhere to those that take that approach because that's my background. So I'm sure there's a bias there from my academic background that makes me lean that way. But the approach that I take is, and many of you have been able to now watch George Potter's presentation, which I thought was very good. I was able to watch the recording, and you can see with their approach and when you're looking at the Old World and the Book of Mormon, that the maps all generally look the same. And the reason for that is whether it's George Potter or Warren Aston or some of the other scholars that have worked in that field and been involved with the Book of Mormon and archaeological sites like Nahum and some of those other points, that all comes to life because we have a datum. We have a reference point to build a geography from. And so it unifies, I believe, Book of Mormon believers around that datum point and around that centerfold. And so what's greatly missing in the New World, and this may be obvious on the surface, we're missing that data point. There's no one archaeological site that anybody could say with 100% certainty is a Book of Mormon location, right? So when in the old world where we have Jerusalem, and actually from there can build several data points, I would argue that it's a real strong case because we have the first one, we have Jerusalem. So when we go to the New World, that's what's missing. That's the problem that we all probably recognize is obviously there. We're missing, if we had Zarahemla, how well could we build a map? If we had the city of Nephi, how well could we build a map for with 100% certainty? And that's what's missing. So with that, we have to take contextual clues and build a layered set of categories to try and overlay on top of each other to create a real world setting. So the approach is text first. What is the text telling us about the people and the events in the Book of Mormon from a natural standpoint? When did they have cities? What size were those cities? Where in roughly a internal map would those cities be located? And things like Paul mentioned, written language, for example, is one category. But if you think about Captain Moroni in a different example, there you have a standing general essentially leading a standing army. His profession was to be a general of a standing army. Much later in life, Mormon takes up that similar type of a office. It's an office that he picks up and later actually sets it down. So it was a position where he was controlling a standing army. That takes a certain level of what anthropologists would call social stratification. And so in these stratified societies, bigger is not better in an anthropologist's point of view. It's just a way to observe and categorize people and how they live and how complex they live in their society. And so you have more simple, and simple might be the wrong word, but more basic, fundamental, smaller groups like tribes, chiefdoms, states, and then obviously the state is the most complex society. Think of Rome, think of our culture today, America, and the globalization that we have today. So in archaeology, there's different layers of social stratification that anthropologists would categorize people in. And when you read the Book of Mormon, you're really reading about two different state level societies, one being the Jaredites in their prime, and you also have the Nephite and I would say the Lamanite culture, although they clash, it seems to be within the same culture core, are both at certain points achieving a state level society. And so they also very clearly have at certain time periods a written language. I think one of the points I made was bringing up where, um, and Paul, just check my time. Whenever I got to go, you just cut me off. But um,
Running close.
running close. So, they write letters back and forth to each other. And based off of that, you need a written language, which, really from a archaeological anthropological point really narrows the search, but I would argue it's critical. The level of stratification, the layers of complexity within the culture that you're just getting out of the text of the Book of Mormon, the necessities of writing, the scale of the map, the cohesiveness of the map, and then taking each one of those, whether it's 6, 7, 8 layers. The geology of the Book of Mormon is a whole total different one that is very valuable. Explanations. You need explanations for, even if God did incredible destructions in 3rd Nephi, what might those geological of how he did it, what might those be? And overlaying those into one narrative is the challenge, but I believe it can be done. I think there is a working hypothesis. I am a Mesoamerican guy, but that doesn't mean I'm not enjoying the other presentations. But to me, those are the steps. That's what I look for, is building from the text, creating layers of categories on different disciplines, topography, geology, anthropology, and then trying to place each of those layers onto a real world setting. That's the real challenge, but I think it requires us to take a step back, text first, and then overlay that one piece at a time and see if there is a place that meets all the criteria, or at least better than the others if there's a better case, worse case, and weighing it in that way. So,
Thank you. I'm going to ask people to defer their questions until we get through the review, but I do very much appreciate it, because as we play archaeologists and go around looking at all the beautiful artifacts that we found, what you laid before us is well worth visiting. Let's go to the testimonies that we had on that first night in which we shared testimonies, and we'll begin with Monty. Monty, as I recall, was focused upon the inspiration of the Book of Mormon that got into it. And so perhaps you review that for us, Monty? Have we lost him?
No, I just had to unmute myself. No, I was just saying that to me, the Book of Mormon was a unique and precious testimony, because there are certain aspects of it that are not in the Bible, like King Benjamin, and the fact that he was truly a servant of his people, and showed us what a truly godly king would be like. And I've always appreciated that. Of course, the dramatic story of the anti-Nephi Lehis, that was something that I was extremely touched by too. So I've always, felt that the Book of Mormon has enriched my life and given me an even deeper basis for my faith. And I appreciate these classes, because I get to look at so many different points of view about the Book of Mormon, both pro and con. So thank you very much for letting me talk.
Thank you for joining us. We have the mother-daughter combination of Joetta and Janae, and I wanted them to particularly come back to the holy whisper concept that they shared, but you've got a couple of minutes to share beyond that. Joetta? You unmute. Unmute.
How's that? Is that better? Okay.
Yes.
We shared about the importance of my family's heritage in the restored gospel. And it began with my great-great-grandfather, who started in the very beginning to take the gospel out to the frontier. And it spans now with my family 7 generations. That means that we've been exploring the faith and sharing the Book of Mormon for many years. And I've noticed as we've been together, and we're a big family and we do get together, that many of us, most of us, have been called to do seemingly unimportant tasks. But one of our family was called to step outside her comfort zone. And that was my great aunt Fanny Pender Page. And she's mentioned in the book, 33 Women of the Restoration. She spent 2 years in Mexico with her 70 husband, Will Penter, and they were taking the Book of Mormon to the Lamanites. But the bombardments were common in that country, and so they had often to run from building to building for their safety, and the church called them home. And when they got home, Will died from a tapeworm that he got while he was in Mexico. But after his death, she was called on to do something very unusual. She was the first woman that the church called into the office and assigned to cross the vast ocean by herself. I can't even imagine it. It was not something that was done in that day and time. One white woman going to a different culture with different skin colors. She established a school in the British West Indies, and then she later married another minister, Page. After spending time in countries outside the US, her journey would take her to Nauvoo to labor in the field at the Mansion House. Her international credentials made her an appropriate guide for Eleanor Roosevelt when she visited the Mansion House in 1938. The Book of Mormon is a vital part of our family's journey of faith and holy whispers. Now, some of you are wondering, what's a holy whisper? Well, in the Book of Mormon, Moroni says it best, make known unto me by the Holy Spirit of God. And my adopted daughter of a different culture will share our personal holy whisper.
Janae, unmute and speak, please.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, good. I did it. I am Janae Clay Fritz. I am a full-blood Native American. I'm half Seneca and half Potawatomi. I was adopted into the Clay family when I was 18 months old. So my first recollection of the Book of Mormon was as a young child, when my parents would have family time with us and read stories from the Bible and between the covers of the Book of Mormon. Other teachings of the Book of Mormon came through church, Sunday school, vacation Bible schools, camps, and reunions, and then discussions with friends and stuff. But we also, through that, had met many different people of different nations and cultures, and a lot of them came to our house and visited. And I'm not going to go through that whole list again, but we had many different tribes and cultures come. We're very shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Holy whisper.
Holy whisper. Thank you. Yes, we had an experience, but it's through my growing up, my teachings in the church, and all the relationships that we've had that taught me how to learn to listen to the Spirit. And that is what brought us to our holy whisper. And, you know, in our world, there are many things that we don't understand and we can't explain. My mom and dad did craft shows all over the country, all over the United States. And they had stores and booths all over too. But this one particular time, Mom was doing a show at a local mall, and she was by herself. And I was impressed on by the Spirit to go check on her. When I got there, I found out she was really sick. She wasn't feeling good at all. And she left, Well, a native man came while she was gone. And when she came back, he was still there. And as she walked into the booth, he looked at her and said, "You are sick." And he began to teach us about healings, how to do them, what they mean. And then he looked at my mom and asked her if she wanted to be healed. And she said, yes, she did. He then proceeded to teach us more about healings, and he had her stand in front of him. And as she did this, he looked at her and said, "You have a lot of faith." He then continued on with the teachings, and he went through the motions of healing her. And when he finished, he said, "You are healed." And she said, "Yes, I am." He then didn't say anything else. He just walked away. And we watched him go. We watched him leave. And then all of a sudden, we didn't see him anymore. We didn't know where he went. And Mom had said she had been looking on the other side of the hallway to see if he'd gone back up that way. And she never saw him go there either. So after he was gone and we didn't see him, I turned to Mom and I asked her, "Who was that guy?" And she started laughing. She said, "I don't know. I thought he was your friend." And I said, "No, I don't know him. I've never seen him before. I thought he was your friend." So yeah, we don't know who he was, where he came from, or where he went. All we know is that he was our holy whisper that touched our lives.
Wow. We are getting some marvelous testimonies this evening. I'm glad I'm not in a position of having to follow that one, but Deb is. And so Deb's indicated that as a beginner on the Book of Mormon, that she's in the process of learning. And so let's find out what she's learning.
Well, thanks. And yeah, I don't like having to follow in such big footsteps, but I do appreciate that testimony very much. And while I don't know how much I'm actually learning, well, I guess I'm learning a lot, but my library is increasing, and I have started to read the between the covers of the Book of Mormon. I obtained a copy of that kind of roundabout in an interesting fashion. And then I also ordered the Book of Mormon, the Restored Covenant edition, which I haven't quite got into that yet because I'm trying to get through the covers of the Book of Mormon. But the whole process of just listening to everybody's presentations and all the various perspectives, it adds another dimension to my learning, I guess, because there's so many different things to learn about it. And so, but it has been very exciting, and I am enjoying very much both the spiritual aspect of it as I study and read and ask for understanding and clarification. It's been a very rewarding and an experience that I consider to be a wonderful blessing.
Thank you, and may your testimony continue to grow. Bev, your testimony impressed me, particularly in your focus on your life being found in its pages, in the Book of Mormon pages. But I'd like to give you the latitude to expand on that a bit, if you would.
Okay, thank you. I actually had an experience in just the last couple of days that I want to tell you about, and it departs a little bit from some of the things we discussed earlier. Jonathan and I were in China. We went in 2019, and we were working for a university there teaching English. It was a wonderful experience to live there for a while and get to know a whole different part of our brothers and sisters in another part of the planet. One thing that made it a little unusual is that we had to agree for our visas and for the contract with the university, we had to agree not to talk about religion. And that was just the requirement of the the Communist Party and the people that ran the university and all universities in China. But so we had our own private worship services on Sunday, but in our teaching and all of our interactions with the Chinese people, we could never mention religion. So happened we were there when COVID started, and so we got sent home from China, but they also asked us to continue online. And we finished out, that was in 2020 up till June. That school year ended. And then in the fall, they called us again and said, because of all the restrictions, they could not hire Americans anymore. But since we were already on their rolls, and they could hire us just from a long distance. So we're continuing now to teach in China, or for the Chinese people. One of the interesting things we've done is we assign them writing discussions where they have to just post their general thoughts and observations, but they have to practice by writing in English. And some of those have been just so fascinating as they talk about how they feel about life, and they'll talk about their philosophies. Now, and these are roughly about 20-year-old, like freshmen and sophomores in the university. It's Nanjing Technology University. One of the things we've noticed, one man, some of the things they post are just universal, that they talk about their girlfriends or their hopes for the future and hopes to have children, and things that you could hear anywhere. One young man wrote about he hated America, and another young man wrote that if he had his way, we would get rid of all private property, and he went on about some of his Marxist goals. And yesterday, one of the students started out with, "I want to tell you about Jesus Christ." And we were pretty shocked when we read his observations. And he quoted a parable. It was in like a different, of course, translation. He had read it in something Chinese and then translated to English, but he talked about you shouldn't, I wish I had it in front of me. Anyway, he talked about not being so concerned with the mote in your eye, in your neighbor's eye, when you have a beam in your own eye. And anyway, it was just amazing that in this unusual context, and I made the comment to Jonathan, we never expected to see this in their discussion. And he said, we were not allowed to discuss this, but there are millions of Christians among the Chinese people. They are allowed to have Christian gatherings, but they aren't allowed to have contact with people outside of China in a religious context. And I just wanted to pass that along, that this is it's a whole new perspective. It's a whole new collection of our Heavenly Father's children. So many that are kind of undercover. We don't know who they are and how many there are, but different sources, we really believe there are millions of Chinese Christians. And among them, at least thousands, I don't know how many, believe in the Book of Mormon. And they do read the Book of Mormon, even in Mandarin. And it'll be fascinating maybe someday to have a connection with them, where we are hoping that some of them can someday visit us in the US, which has just become harder because the Chinese government cracked down and revoked American visas just in the last year. But if they come here, then we can openly talk about it and give them copies of the Book of Mormon in their language, and it will be a lot different. But I just wanted to kind of share a little different perspective. Thanks.
Thank you. That takes me back to two lines out of my prayer this evening. We are grateful for your kindness, your willingness to forgive, your grace, that we can glimpse your heaven on earth and in others to see your face. When we can see the face of Christ in people in other cultures like that, I think we're getting closer to the Zion that he's called us to. Thank you for that beautiful testimony. Roger asked for you to come back with the universal formula for relationships and expand on that a little bit, if you would, please. Roger, unmute.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I basically summarized what I was talking about was being an avid reader and studier of the Book of Mormon for 40 years. A number of years ago, decided that it was time not to read it again, but to outline it. And so I spent a year outlining the Book of Mormon into what ended up being 59 pages of outline notes. And then took a break and spent another year or two compiling my outlines into what I thought would be something that would be, I don't know, that could put it together into something. And I wasn't looking for anything, just to try to compile topics, similar topics. As I did that, I noticed that one set of topics just kept coming up over and over and over again, and they became pages of my summary, not just little paragraphs of it. And that set of topics is what I believe to be the core message of the Book of Mormon, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ, or the doctrine of Jesus Christ. And you will find it so well documented that it is hard to find a page or two without parts of it on it. And specifically, Nephi's almost final words are repeating that doctrine 3 different times, that doctrine being faith in Jesus Christ, repentance, and then the baptism, which is the forgiveness of sins, and then the enduring to the end, or the becoming as a child, which is the whole rest of our lives, and then comes salvation. And then that's so apparent that if you look at it again, when Jesus comes in 3 Nephi chapter 5, it's one of the first things that he introduces, and he also repeats it 3 different times. And it's so prevalent that Mormon, even in his final words, even after appears to be all of his battles, he's in the Book of Mormon, chapter 3, it's his last chapter. He repeats that gospel again, almost as his summary for something that he's been writing and rewriting for years and years. And so I believe that to be the core message of the Book of Mormon. And so I took that, not only as that, but I've been studying that message, relating it to the Bible messages, which all those components are in the Bible as well. Of course, you see all of those, and you can find them in different places, maybe not so succinctly defined like that. But as I continue to study that, found all that in almost every prophet in the Book of Mormon had a similar, almost all parts of that message in there. But as I continue to study it, I noticed that it's not just something that is the gospel and how we follow Jesus, but I see it as our universal human formula, that if we have faith in our fellow man and we can trust in him and can repent of the things that we do to him, then he would forgive us. And we could then build that relationship and endure and grow in that relationship to a point to where it goes on to, I don't know, close to perfection, if there is such a thing. But so I believe it not only to be the core message of the Book of Mormon for our dealings and our relationship with God and Jesus Christ, but a core message on how we would deal even with our individual relationships, because those are the only relationships, if you don't have the forgiveness and the faith for each other, if that is broken, then your relationship is broken. And so I believe that core message to be a relationship message, as well as a individual relationship message, as well as the message of the following of Jesus Christ.
Thank you. Beautiful, succinct summary. Our next presentation is from Ralph and Nancy. He talked a bit about traveling by the Spirit, and he also mentioned the being taken by the Spirit and conveyed out of the book of Helaman. So I asked for Ralph and Nancy to come back to us tonight and expand on that a little bit and give us a quick review. Ralph, you unmute, please. Unmute, Ralph.
Ralph, you're still muted.
Okay, now I have you.
Now we got
I
it.
think I've got you now. You got me?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Well, I was trying to, am I okay now?
Proceed.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'm very humbled at the articulate, so accurate studies that the folks have had on this this program. And so as a native and also as a scientist, I'm just always wondering if what I thinking is even important. I am a critical reader, and I read as if somebody outside has picked up the book for the first time and read it. And so that's why I come up with these questions. Not that I don't doubt at all the book, because I have a very strong testimony, but it's the idea that there are some things that didn't make sense. And I look at these as fun things, and I hope that came through on the last presentation when we looked at all the travels from Jerusalem to the Red Sea, and how that could have happened to shorten the time period, and the geological changes that did take place, so that some of the questions that I had and still do in the Book of Mormon can be answered. Oh, on the geography, I had a challenge for this young fellow here. He looks young to me. That in two places, this is only an example, of a person reading it and then seeing two different things that conflict. It's so much interesting. Okay, so now we're looking at the distance of the narrow neck. Has anyone covered that? Yeah. So in one place in the book, it says, well, it was a day and a half journey. In another part, it said on the narrow neck was just a day's journey. And so I see those things, and I wonder, how can that happen? That two places haven't mentioned it, in two different ways. So your experts there that's covered a lot of the geography, I'm sure they have an answer. And of course, I have an answer too. And so then we covered some of the things about the Jaredites and the hole and the bottom of the boat. These are so surface type of things, but it is an important that somebody ask a question, and how is it possible, you see. So we covered some of those. We covered some of the migrations that might have possible connection to my particular nation, because the Liahona was used in various techniques. And as a scientist, these techniques were important to know. Like the Choctaws, they used a pointing pole, and it was guided, by the spirit. And the Liahona was also guided, by the faith. And I think that was just a possible interesting connections there. And so I am a critical reader. I believe that there are more insights, the more questions that we ask. And so I have a whole list of questions, but I'll be getting even deeper into the idea that somewhere along the line, native teachings found its way into the book. That's a real mystery of how that's possible. And there were some native teachings that I mentioned in the last presentation that I just didn't believe myself. And Paul had mentioned that some of the natives, the medicine men or the spiritual leaders talked about this traveling by the Spirit. So I hope I'm not concentrating on something that's not important, but I never did believe that. I didn't understand it. And how a person can travel and be in two places or go someplace. And that was mentioned in the book. Now, when I say the book, that means the Book of Mormon, that here we have a fellow that is imprisoned, and yet he travels by the Spirit in body and teaches. And I thought, I've heard that before in native traditions, but I never believed it. I would have never thought that the book would have that particular native teachings. Even the concept of the earth coming alive, like the earth groans, Mother Earth, those are native terms that find themselves in the book. And we're going to you're going to discover that in the next presentation, we're going to even more of these interesting possible connections to native teachings. So Paul, I don't know what is important in this type of I know the testimony is important. My testimony was I tore up the book. Yep, as a teenager, I tore that book up. And that always, people wonder what that means, but it also meant that that book came alive. Chapter by chapter, book by book, that came alive as a teenager. And so I'm hoping that in this reflections of the book and what it says and the questions that I have that maybe nobody else has, but at least I have them, and that there's some questions that I still don't have answers for. And I'm hoping that through the presentations that those answers will be, another thing, my father said that it has the wrong name. Did I tell you about that, Paul?
Go ahead.
That my father said the book had the wrong name. Yeah, because my father said, it should have been called the book of Isaiah. Because of course, that's because the uncovering the book, and the book that Isaiah mentioned coming out of the ground. And so my father always made fun. He said, this is not called, this didn't have the right name, you see. So we have interesting reflections like that. That's for fun, you see. Okay, I'll stop there hoping that I have said something important.
Thank you.
Rob,
I think you did.
I have an observation.
Go ahead.
You and I are the same age, but you look a lot younger than I do. We were classmates at Greystone.
We'll pick that kind of comment up.
Yes.
George Potter, I have not seen on the screen tonight, so very briefly, he presented on the Book of Mormon in Arabia. And it was fascinating because he did support what Ralph had said earlier about possible change of geography to change the distance from Jerusalem to the Red Sea. But he pointed out 81 Book of Mormon assertions in the right sequence in Arabia. Therefore, he was making an extremely strong statistical case for the Book of Mormon origins there. And then our next speaker was Elray Hendrickson. Elray gave us a European perspective on the Book of Mormon. I don't think Elray is with us, but Brother Aspie is. And if you would like to provide your 3 o'clock in the morning perspective on the Book of Mormon for a moment, you're welcome to. Are you there? Or have we lost him? Brother Aspie? All right, appears he may have checked out. Anyway, Elray wanted
He's
us.
there, Paul.
Oh, you're there?
Aspie is there.
Go ahead. Aspie, if you want to speak.
I'm just following.
Your vantage point on the Book of Mormon from the European perspective?
I do not know what to say about that, about the European perspective, because Europe is a mix of a lot of different countries, so it's impossible to say a European view. You have France, you have Germany, you have Britain. It are all complete different cultures, so it's too difficult to speak for all of them.
All right. Well, Elroy gave us the perspective that the Book of Mormon is an American tale, and as such, it speaks of the great American empire, and Jesus warned us against empire building. And so he was anxious for us to recognize the message of the Book of Mormon is a message that ultimately boils down to learn to live together in peace. And if you pick up that fundamental message out of the book, then you have something that counters much of what American history has been about. So for Americans, I think it was just a little bit of a big bite to swallow, but useful to get another unique perspective. John Hamer, then I have not seen him on the screen either, and he shared with us that we need to interpret the scripture responsibly, that we need to be careful about trying to use literal translations, because literally, when you look at 2 Peter and recognize that was written probably 200 years after Peter died, that we need to be very careful about applying a literal perspective to the scripture. That we need to look instead for the message for life that it offers us. And then Faye Shaw asked to go last tonight, so that brings us to Rick Bennett, who gave us a review of the geographical theories. And so, Rick, you're up. Give us your review again, if you would, please.
Yeah, so I have an update, actually, believe it or not. I reviewed 6 theories plus the Middle East, Arabia area, and I talked a little bit about internal theories. Casey Kern apparently is a bigger expert than I am even. I'm just going to add this to the chat. He's got a link for Book of Mormon online, bookofmormon.online/map. It's kind of an interactive map. I was clicking on it a little bit earlier today, and for some reason, I'm just got a spinning globe. I just mentioned it to Casey. I don't think he's here tonight, but apparently there's 3 other theories that I neglected. I'll outline the ones I mentioned really quickly. Internal theories: Arabia, the hemispheric model, Malay, Baja, Africa, and Mesoamerica, and one Heartland. I guess that's 8. So apparently there's 3 more that I didn't know about until after the meeting. There's a Costa Rican theory, a Panama theory, and a Sri Lankan theory, which I really, really want to check out. Because I looked at that last week, and I don't know anything about that, so I'll have to find out about that, or maybe you'll have to get Casey on so I can learn more about that. So, but he's got a website there that's kind of interesting. So I think it's fun. I don't know which of these theories is right or wrong, or maybe they're all wrong, who knows, but I'd like for at least one of them to be right. And you know, I have a strong testimony to the Book of Mormon, and grateful for the many teachings in it. And I'll just add here really quickly. I know you've got Steve Pineacker up in a couple of weeks, and I'll just let Steve. I'm about 150 pages into Chris Thomas's book, A Pentecostal Reads the Book of Mormon. And it's definitely interesting to see or to hear a non-restorationist, I'll use that word because you guys aren't all, none of you guys are Mormons but me probably, but a non-restorationist perspective on the Book of Mormon. And so it's been interesting to read that. So I'll keep mine short and sweet.
Thank you. I suspect there'll be questions. Let's invite Faye to give her summation, and then we'll get to the questions. Faye address us on the new Book of Mormon that she significantly contributed to, and I've been using it since her presentation and enjoying it. Faye, unmute, please.
I think I'm unmuted. I'm
Yes.
going to try a screen share if it works. Here it is. Okay. This Book of Mormon is, I worked on the cross references and the index. I created them. Several things about it is it's the most pure because they compared it with the original 25% of the LDS and the 75% that's in Independence, Missouri. For the first time, the preface has verse numbers, which makes it a lot easier to refer to. And it is part of the Book of Mormon, so that's important. It's grouped phrases together other than verses. So this is in the most Book of Mormons, just the line above that, an instrument in the hand of God with exceeding faith to work mighty miracles. But in the RCE, the same thing has with exceeding faith, and the verse continues to work mighty miracles. And so because of this, the book is much easier to understand and much easier to read. And I mentioned before, when I would give books out and tell people this, I'd know if they'd opened the book and looked at it, because they'd come back all excited and say the same thing I just told them. Okay. The book looks like this when you open it up. It's got larger print. It's in paragraph form again, which makes it easier to understand, and lots of wide margins for notes. The words of Christ, the red doesn't show up very well here, but the words of Christ are in red. And we debated about, there's other words, where he's quoted in the book, but we decided a lot of times the words, angel words and his words, merge into the speaker's words, and it's hard to tell where one starts and the other ends, which is great, we should be able to talk so no one could tell where one begins and the other ends. But we decided just to include it when his feet are on the ground here in the country. And it's also nice with red words it sets everything in context. It's just easier to find them. It has, whoops, going the wrong ways. It has a new concordance, and there's like 40, well, actually almost 200 pages at the back for the concordance and geography. Excuse me, we capitalized all deity in there, and so any references to him, which I really like. I wish all our scriptures did that. And we also capitalized geography, which makes it stand out better. Lots of words, well, not lots, but some words change it, because the Lord hath covenanted this land unto me and my children forever means a binding agreement. But with the study, we found out the word should have been consecrated, which means set apart, dedicated, or holy, which makes it much more sacred. And so another one was in Lehi's visions, a multitude was feeling their way. The missing word was pressing. And pressing makes it crowding, pushing, eager, much more aggressive than just kind of stumbling, feeling your way around. Another place the word not was left out. I'll give one more example. My soul was wrecked with eternal torment. This is Alma when he was converted. And erect is something different than racked. Racked is tortured or tormented, and this is how he felt. Then the book has good Hebrew but bad English. And there's been English versions, which are great. However, they lose the Hebrew. And this is one, as an English teacher, really got me. You use who and that with people, and Hebrew is which. So it was like fingernails on a chalkboard for me to adjust to this Hebrewism. And another part is words left out, lost a lot of the poetry, eliminated the word beholding again, but it's part of Hebrew repetition and parallelism, and it's beautiful poetry. And a lot of that can be lost. I remember in 1997, they had discovered 97 different poetry and styles and sentence structure styles. And the one thing I want to tell you is if you want a book, this is where you can get it. Right now they're out of the paperbacks. You can get leathers with no tabs for $25, leather for $30. And I forgot to mention, I collect books when I can, and I've got, although they're out of paperback reprinting, I've got 8 paperbacks. 3 or 4 of them are in blue, and they're $15 because that's what I paid for them, but the other paperbacks are only $10. So if anybody needs a paperback, call me at 913-284-6178, and we'll get together. Okay.
Thank you, Faye.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Oh, I lost you. Oh, there you go. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why did you retain all of the King James version thous and
I'll answer it right away without the rest of the question. That's the way Joseph read it. Nobody retained it. That's what came to him. And I believe there's so much Hebrewisms in it that I truly believe it was translated word for word. So that's probably, if he spoke to us today, he might use a slightly different language because we're speaking a slightly different language now. And that's how we could tell when Hebrew things were written, because every 50 years the Hebrew language changed enough that we could tell what area or what time period it came from.
Hey, there's been a couple of questions that have asked if you could put your contact information into the chat and
Okay.
maybe the place where they can get the book.
Okay. I took the one down too fast, didn't I? The Book of Mormon Foundation in Independence, Missouri. It's 1 block north of the square. My number. 1, 3, 2, 8. Okay, and if you want to write to me, okay, this is my phone number and my address.
Faye,
Yes.
this is Frank. Might mention also that Ed Funtz, I see he's on here tonight. He's the one that the Lord gave the
poetry
format, and we might want to ask him sometime to share his testimony on here. I think that would be wonderful.
Wonderful. I mentioned it in my longer version. I cut out a lot. But yes, Ed made a wonderful contribution. It just made it so much easier to understand. Yeah, Ed, do you want to say anything?
Oh, this is Neil, and I'd like to comment about something. The question that was asked, why is the King James language being used in the Book of Mormon? And I'd like to just comment that there are in language what we call registers. You can have a magazine quality of language, what you would find written in Saturday Evening Post or something like that. Or you have newspaper register. Mm-hmm. Then in addition to that, you can have something called frozen register. Frozen register are things like the Declaration of Independence and the King James Bible are written in what we call frozen register. There is the language that tends to be quoted and it doesn't change, it's frozen. when you're writing scripture, if it's possible, you want it to be prose and register so that it doesn't evolve with the natural evolution of a language. You want it to stay frozen. Some of the plays of Shakespeare are now in frozen register. They don't change. So I think it's important to understand that God knows that about our language, and he chose to put the Book of Mormon in frozen register for us.
Ed's got his hand up there, had it up.
Yeah, unmute Ed, please.
I don't know how, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, you're good.
Are you Paul?
Yes, and I'm just amazed and delighted to see you because your mother was one of my teachers.
Well, I've really been fascinated by this conversation about the book of Isaiah. I have here on my table this book called the Holy Bible, the New King James Version. This is the one that I found in a book library, in a bookstore in Glendale, California, in the early 1980s when I was struggling with rewriting the entire Book of Mormon into a reader's edition. And I was really struggling with Second Nephi because that's where there are like 14 chapters of Isaiah quoted. And when I was standing in this bookstore, I reached over and picked up a copy, and I opened it up, and it fell open to Isaiah. And there, the whole book of Isaiah was done in poetry. I was stunned because they had already done the heavy lifting. They had identified the poetry. And when you go to the beginning part of this book, they describe what they call, what we call paragraphs. They call them strophes. And they talked about the Hebrew poetic forms of parallelism, which Faye just mentioned. So I had to go back and start over. Page 1. And by the way, when you try to put page 1 into English sentences, you can't do it. It's not English. Now, the interesting thing about Isaiah is that there was just a recent paper done out of BYU, I think, or at least people involved with that scroll. And they had discovered that the King James Version, the language of the King James Version, is actually called 5th century English. It's not the modern version of the King James Bible. So what we have is Joseph Smith producing a Book of Mormon from a gold plate inscription, which he could not read. He didn't know that language, and translating it into not only the King James Version that we think it is, but it's actually the 5th century, which was stopped being used approximately over 100 years before Joseph did his work. So he's translating from a work he can't read into a work that he didn't even know about, and neither did we. Now, so I often say, you know, Joseph Smith did not translate the Book of Mormon. That book was given to him by the Spirit. But who did the translation? Who did the work of translating the book of Isaiah into 5th century English? That's a good question. I think there's only 3 possibilities, called the 3 Nephites. They were the ones who wanted to take the book to their descendants, and they had to prepare the way for Joseph to be able to be given the words in English that they should use, and they prepared this before Joseph came on the scene. And that is a perfect explanation for why we have these two different versions of Isaiah, one more modern version and the other is the 5th century. Well, now whether that's actually the case, I haven't verified because I don't read 5th century English. I barely read the English we have now. I'm kidding, of course. But the work on creating a reader's edition of the Book of Mormon, I undertook in order to share it. And it ended up being the most incredible experience of my life. Sometime I could share more with you.
We'll invite you to share more with us, Ed. I appreciate your sharing this much. But yeah, we do have open spots in July and August.
This coming July and August?
Yes, we meet every Monday evening, 8 o'clock Central Time, and I'd be happy to provide you a slot.
Well, I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you.
One of my, I've been acting as pastor to the a small restoration branch in San Diego that had no priesthood. And we've been forced to stop meeting due to the restrictions here in California, plus the long drive. But one of my branch members sent me the announcement from Paul Ludy as to this meeting, and that's why I logged in. I was very interested and very happy to hear what's going on.
I have fond memories of your mother as a teacher, and I believe your father's name was Roscoe. And
yes, it was.
And I think you have a brother and a sister that I am having difficulty digging up the names on.
Well, there's William, who lives in Independence. My sister is deceased. My other brother, Arthur, is deceased. And both my mother and father are deceased. So it's a race between Bill and I to see who's going to make it the longest.
Art is the one that I remember the best, beyond your mother, of course. But a remarkable family, and I'm very, very much pleased to be reacquainted with you again and count you among the twins and brothers that I have on this kind of a meeting.
And I might also say, I think Neil Simmons is on here tonight.
Yes.
And Frank Fry. And these two gentlemen have come to my home here in Marietta, California. And we have talked about the translation work they've been doing and how they've been standing on the shoulders of the RCE to do what they're doing. I think they're just doing a fantastic job.
We have Frank coming up for a presentation in a couple of weeks. Let me quickly review that schedule because we are in the time for that. Next week we have Steve Pinnaker, who is the American Evangelical Encountering the Book of Mormon and Restoration Movement. May 31st is Frank Fry with evidences of the Book of Mormon that need emphasis. We have Ralph and Roland Williston coming on the native teachings of the Book of Mormon on June 7. Paul and Rena DeBarth on Love in the Book of Mormon on June 14. And Richard and Arlotta Hawks to the Hand of God in the Book of Mormon, and today on June 21st. Jonathan Neville on Appendix 10, which is a comparison of 5 historic texts being brought to light on June 28th. We also have some scheduled later, but those are the schedule is filled up until July, and so for Ed and others that want to get in, there's still opportunity. But we've gone beyond our first hour, and so as usual, we'll leave the floor open for questions and comments for all of you that have participated tonight as reviewing participants. I'm very much appreciative, but I'd like to offer the class the challenge to provide a summation. What kind of a summation statement would you make about these 8 presentations?
Paul?